My name is Danielle Carter. I'm 35 years old, living in Portland, and I spent my entire youth doing the right thing for my family. I'm the kind of person who shows up on time, replies to birthday texts even when no one remembers mine, and is willing to leave work in the middle of the day just to pick up a relative from the hospital. I'm not loud, nor was I ever the special child. I was simply the one in the background, doing everything I could to keep the family from falling apart, and no one noticed. Last spring, my younger sister Tessa hosted her engagement party at a fancy rooftop restaurant in downtown Seattle. My mom called me with that soft, almost sweet voice she only used when she was about to ask for a favor. "Sweetheart, I know it's last minute, but would you mind helping put down the deposit for the party?" "Tessa's really stressed," I agreed, like always. I called the venue, picked the date, paid the deposit, helped with decorations, even designed personalized congratulatory cards with their names engraved. I thought maybe, just maybe, this time would be different. Maybe I'd finally be considered part of something. That night, I walked into the restaurant on time, wearing a new suit, holding a glass of champagne and a small gift. Tessa saw me, gave a half smile, then pointed to a folding chair tucked awkwardly beside a trash bin, and with a voice as casual as discussing the weather, she said, "Oh, this table's for family only. Can you sit over there, please?" I froze. I thought she was joking, but no one laughed, no one stopped her. My mother looked away. My father clinked his glass like I didn't exist. And so I sat down, quietly, on the edge of a party I had helped build. 2 hours passed. No one asked if I had eaten. No one even looked in my direction. Then the bill arrived, over $3,000, and every eye in the room turned to me. But this time, I didn't pull out my wallet. I didn't smile and endure. I didn't say, "It's okay." I stood up and said the words I should have said years ago. What I said next canceled the wedding. It shattered my family. And me? I found something I had spent the past 2 decades believing I didn't deserve. Freedom. But about you? Have you ever been treated like you were invisible by your own family? Have you ever stood in the background, silently hoping to be seen, only to be overlooked again and again? Tell me your story in the comments. And if you've ever had to fight for your place in your own family, hit subscribe before I tell you what happened next. The eldest of 2 sisters in a family from Portland. We were never poor, not materially, but affection was always distributed in the strangest ways. My mom, a former art teacher, used to say soft philosophical things like, "Every child is a unique color in the family's painting, but if anyone were to look in from the outside, they'd probably see me as the pale, blank background while Tessa was the vibrant hue everyone revolved around." My dad was an electrical engineer who retired early after a stroke when I was 28. I've lost count of how many times I left work in the middle of the day to take him to follow-up appointments, handle insurance claims, or sign bank documents for him since his right hand no longer worked properly. Every time, my mother would just nod and say, "You're really something." If it were Tessa, she would have cried all morning. Tessa was always the favored one, though it was never said out loud. But I felt it. In the way Mom gently tousled her hair after every mess she caused, and in the way Dad would furrow his brows with frustration whenever I dared to suggest Tessa should learn to take responsibility for herself. When Tessa failed her first year of college because she was busy chasing some healing crystal startup on Instagram, I was the one who paid off her credit card debt. When she broke up with her 3rd boyfriend in under 2 years and ran away from home for nearly a month, I was the one who drove 6 hours to Spokane to pick her up, wrap her in a blanket, make her ginger tea and sit in silence while she cried through the night. I never wanted gratitude, but what I always longed for was recognition. Just once, I wished my parents would say, "If it weren't for you, this family would have fallen apart." But instead, at every family gathering, I was assigned the side dishes, the cleanup, and the folding chair near the kitchen, for convenience. Meanwhile, Tessa was always seated at the center of the table, introduced as the family's proud artist, even though she had only sold a handful of paintings on Etsy. I remember a Thanksgiving 2 years ago. I brought an apple tart I had baked myself, using Grandma's old-fashioned recipe, the kind my dad used to love. But when I lifted the lid and placed it on the table, My mom barely glanced at it before gently setting down a tray of store-bought pastries from Tessa's favorite bakery right beside it, then said to everyone, "Now this is the dessert Tess used to ask for when she was little. Brings back memories." And just like that, no one touched the tart I made. I sat at the end of the table, smiling as I cut myself a slice, repeating, "It's okay," like I always did. But deep down, I already knew the truth. I didn't truly belong here, not in the way Tessa was always embraced. Still, I stayed. I showed up. I brought birthday gifts for Mom every year. I was the only one who called Dad every Monday to check on his blood pressure, because I used to believe that if I was just patient enough, gave enough, did enough, one day, I'd be seen as part of it all. The news of Tessa's engagement didn't come to me through an excited phone call from her, but through a short message in the family group chat. "Hey fam, Logan proposed at Puget Sound yesterday." That was it. No personal message, no invitation to share in the joy. I typed a few words of congratulations, then erased them. In the end, I just sent a heart emoji, not because I wasn't happy for her, but because I was far too used to never being one of the first people to know. A few days later, Mom called. "Danielle," she said, her voice both sweet and cautious, like she'd rehearsed it. "We're organizing an engagement dinner for Tessa and Logan at this rooftop place in Seattle. Nothing huge, about 20 people, but very elegant. Logan picked it because his parents like open spaces and sunsets." I didn't even get a chance to respond before she added, "The only thing is, the reservation requires an early deposit. Could you front it for now? Just a few hundred, honey? I'll pay you back later." I held the phone in silence. Because I knew all too well that "I'll pay you back" really meant "you'll never see that money again," but I still said yes, like I always did. I called the restaurant, reserved a table for 20, selected a sample menu, even paid up front for the floral arrangements because Mom insisted, "We can't use fake flowers, they'll look awful in photos." I forwarded the confirmation email to Mom and Tessa. No one replied. I kept telling myself, "Don't take it personally, this is for family." But the signs kept coming, quiet and steady, like the ticking just before a bomb goes off. In a conversation between Mom and Tessa, I was casually left out of the loop. They had created a new group chat called Magic Engagement. I only found out because Mom accidentally sent me a photo from it, then quickly messaged, "Oh, you don't need to worry about that, sweetie." I scrolled down and saw the seating chart design. The central table included my parents, Logan and his family, and a few of Tessa's closest friends. My name was nowhere on it. I didn't even know what to feel anymore. Sadness? Anger? Or just a familiar sense of being unseen. The day before the party, Mom called again and asked me to swing by a high-end florist downtown to pick up the arrangement. "Tessa's swamped. Can you do it, since you're already out and about?" I had already finished work, and it was pouring rain, but I said yes anyway. I stood waiting nearly an hour at the shop because of a mix-up with the order, then personally drove the $400 0-cents bouquet to the venue. No one thanked me. When I finally got home, soaked to the bone, I opened my phone to see a message from Tessa in that same group chat, once again accidentally forwarded by Mom. "Everything's finally perfect. Only the people who really matter will be at the main table." I stared at that sentence, again and again. The people who really matter. I didn't need to ask any more questions. I just quietly turned off my phone, deleted the message, and walked into the bathroom. Under the stream of hot water, I asked myself a question I never thought I'd dare to say out loud. If I disappeared from their lives, would anyone notice the empty space? Still, I decided to attend the party, not because I hoped anything would change, but because I wanted to look the truth in the face. For the first time in my life, I didn't want to lie to myself anymore by thinking, maybe they just forgot, or maybe it wasn't intentional. I had endured invisibility long enough. Now I wanted to see just how raw it really was. Arrived exactly on time. Not early, not late. 7 p.m., on a windswept rooftop in the heart of downtown Seattle. The golden lights reflected off the high-rise windows, making everything look like a perfect painting. Everything was perfect, except for my place in it. I wore a deep navy suit, classic and elegant. My hair was softly curled, my makeup meticulously done, and in my hand, I carried a bottle of Veuve Clicquot, Tessa's favorite, and a silver-embossed card bearing her and Logan's names. I walked in, my heartbeat steady in that familiar rhythm I felt every time I was invited to a family milestone. I smiled at the hostess, gave my name, and was pointed toward the private dining area. And there they were, my mom, my dad, Tessa, Logan, Mr. and Mrs. Whitmore, Logan's parents, and a scattering of familiar and unfamiliar faces. Everyone looked radiant. The party had already begun. Soft music played. Candles flickered. Glasses clinked. I walked toward them slowly, gently, expecting at least a nod, a smile. A "Hey, you're here." But Tessa turned, gave me a slight smile, and gestured to the right with a quick tilt of her head. "This table's for family only, sis. But there's a seat over there," she said, her tone light and casual like she was quoting the price of a wedding cake. I followed her gaze. It was a small, round folding table, draped in a thin white cloth, set near the trash bin. The chair was a cheap black plastic one, nothing like the velvet-lined wooden chairs at the main table. I thought she was joking. Honestly, I stood there, waiting for someone to laugh, for Mom to frown and scold her, Tessa, for Dad to offer his seat, for Logan to chime in and smooth it over. But nothing happened. Mom stared into her wine glass. Dad shrugged. Logan gave a polite, hollow smile and a small nod. No one looked directly at me. I heard a soft chuckle from one of Tessa's friends. Maybe it had nothing to do with me, but in that moment it felt like a knife slicing through the tired old wallpaper of my long-suffering silence. I said nothing. I walked over to that plastic chair, set the champagne bottle down on the ground, and sat. I didn't take off my coat. I didn't eat. I didn't drink. I just sat there, exactly where they had placed me, on the margins. 2 hours passed. No one asked what I wanted to eat. No one glanced in my direction. I heard Tessa raise her glass to thank the dearest people who have always stood by me. I saw my mother wipe away a tear as Logan spoke of having a wonderful family to build a future with. Something inside me broke. But it wasn't pain. It was release. Then the bill arrived. The server approached the main table politely, bowing slightly. "Tonight's total is $3,082.00. Shall I charge it to the card used for the deposit?" Tessa looked up and pointed in my direction. "She'll cover it." I stood up, slowly. I looked the server in the eye, and my voice was steadier than it had ever been. "I didn't eat. I didn't drink. I wasn't allowed at the table. I'm not family. Don't hand me the bill." The air turned still. Tessa flushed. My mother's mouth opened as if to speak, but no words came out. The server hesitated, glancing back at me. "But you're the one who made the reservation." I made the reservation, called the venue, picked the flowers, adjusted the menu, and even fetched the bouquet myself in the pouring rain. But I was seated at the side table, next to the trash. I picked up the unopened champagne, slipped my coat back on, and pointed to the plastic table. "That spot tells you everything you need to know about who I am to them. Not a member, just a tool. So no, I'm not responsible for the bill." And then I turned and walked away. I don't remember how they reacted. I didn't care anymore. I didn't feel anger. I didn't cry. I just knew I had finally stood up from the seat I had occupied my entire life without even realizing it, the nameless chair, the voiceless seat. The only question echoing in my head as I walked down the stairs was, if this is how they treat someone who shares their blood, then who do they actually consider family? I got home just before 11 p.m., still in the suit, now wrinkled, still holding the unopened bottle of champagne, hair tousled, eyes fixed on the pavement the entire drive, too afraid to stop and let the swelling in my chest fully take form. I didn't turn on the lights. I just sat silently on the couch. The silence felt so foreign, compared to the laughter, the clinking of glasses, the soft piano music from the party. It felt unreal. My phone began to buzz. The first message came from Mom. "Danielle, What on earth were you thinking? Do you have any idea how much you embarrassed the whole family? A minute later, Tessa, you seriously ruined everything. In front of Logan's family. In front of his parents? I can't believe you. I read them but didn't reply. Not because I had nothing to say, but because I knew no matter what I said, they'd only respond with justifications, blame, or silence. No one asked why I reacted the way I did. No one asked if I was okay. No one wondered why the person who had always stayed quiet chose to finally walk away from a party she herself had helped put together. They didn't actually care. The next morning I woke up to 2 missed calls from Logan and an email from an unknown sender. I thought maybe, just maybe, it would be an apology, but no. It was the final invoice from the restaurant manager, confirming they still hadn't received the remaining payment. I stared at the number, over $3,000, then deleted the email. It wasn't mine to pay. Later that afternoon, I heard that Logan had a very tense conversation with his father. One of Logan's friends who used to be close with Tessa texted me. Mr. Whitmore found out you paid the deposit, arranged the flowers, organized the whole thing, and were seated next to a trash bin. He was furious. I didn't even know what to feel. Revenge? Satisfaction? Honestly, I just felt empty. In the family group chat, usually flooded with congratulations, party photos, pictures of Tessa showing off her diamond ring, there was silence. Not a single new message. I knew that, to them, I had become the difficult one. The one who dared to rupture the perfect shell they'd worked so hard to maintain. The image of a loving, supportive family. But the truth was, it had only ever been love for the one who cried the loudest, and support for the one who caused the most trouble. And me? I was the one in the background, quiet, until I wasn't. And that's what scared them. I didn't turn on the TV. I didn't play music. I just lay there, in the dark, holding that unopened bottle of champagne, and the only thought echoing in my mind was, did I do the right thing? Or did I just lose everything because I dared to ask for respect? My recovery didn't start with a grand declaration. There was no dramatic new me post on social media, no soul-searching trip to Bali. It began with small acts, simple things I hadn't done for myself in over 20 years. I removed the family group chat from my favorites. I unfollowed Tessa on Instagram. I booked a session with a therapist for the first time in my life, not because someone told me to, not as a way to de-stress, but because I needed to understand how long I'd been living as a shadow. Then one day, I received a call from an unknown number. The woman on the line had a slow, low but polite voice. "Hello, Miss Carter. This is Brooke Whitmore, Logan's mother." I paused for a few seconds. "Hello. I hope I'm not disturbing you. I just wanted to ask a few things. I heard you were the one who organized the engagement party." I didn't answer right away, but then I told her. No embellishments, no dramatics. I told her I was the one who paid the deposit, made the calls, brought the flowers, wasn't offered a seat, wasn't served food, and was handed the bill as if that was simply expected. There was a long pause on the other end of the line, and then all she said was, "Thank you for being honest." A week later, I heard that Tessa had moved out of Logan's apartment. The wedding was indefinitely postponed. A few days after that, I opened an old joint bank account I had once set up, with Tessa, the one she used for Netflix, Uber, Instacart. There were still a few $1,000s in it that I had deposited, for convenience. She had never paid me back. I withdrew the remaining balance and closed the account. Not out of anger, just because enough was enough. I booked a solo trip to Europe. A trip I had planned 4 years earlier, but canceled when Mom called saying Dad had been rushed to the hospital. This time, no one called. And I didn't need a reason to go anymore. In Florence, I wandered through the square at twilight, a glass of red wine in hand, listening to a violinist play a melody I didn't recognize and didn't need to. No one here knew I was Tessa's sister. No one expected me to be the good one, the strong one, the sacrificial one. I was just Danielle, a 35-year-old woman living for herself, for the very first time. On the plane back to Portland, I typed a few lines into my journal. I don't need to be forgiven. I need to be understood. And if no one else is willing to do that, then I'll be the first to do it for myself. When I got home, I noticed something strange. My tiny apartment, the one that had always felt like a pit stop for everyone who called me in a crisis, now held a completely different energy. Peace. Not because the phone had stopped ringing, but because I had finally severed the thread that tied my self-worth to being useful. I no longer wanted to be the shoulder to lean on only when things fell apart. I wanted to be someone with boundaries, with a life of her own, and with the right to say no. I didn't expect her to come. That afternoon, I had just returned from therapy and was making a cup of tea when the doorbell rang. I walked over, assuming it was a delayed grocery delivery, but then I saw my mother. She stood at the door, in an old gray knit cardigan, holding a box of blueberry tart, the kind I had made that Thanksgiving no one touched. She looked tired, and there was something in her eyes that no longer resembled defense or pride. It was hesitation, almost humility. "Do you have a moment?" my mother asked, her voice barely louder than the wind stirring in the hallway. "I just wanted to talk for a bit." I don't know what made me open the door. She stepped inside and sat at the dining table like nothing had ever broken between us, though her arms remained wrapped around the box of tart, as if she were holding on to a mistake she didn't know how to set down properly. "I'm not here to make excuses," she said the moment I sat across from her. "I didn't come to defend Tessa or to tell you to let it go. I know I was wrong." I didn't respond. I didn't nod or shake my head. I just looked at her. She took a deep breath. "From the time you were little, you were always the easy one. Never a bother. You did your homework on your own, packed your own bags, cooked your own meals. You did everything before anyone had to ask. And I thought you were fine. That you didn't need anything more." Still, I stayed quiet, listening, not because I was ready to forgive, but because, for once, I wanted to hear her speak without the word but. "That's you, that," she continued, not because there was nothing to see, but because I didn't want to look. Seeing you quietly pushed aside, still smiling through it, it made me feel awful, and instead of facing that, I chose to ignore it, to keep believing everything was fine. I set my teacup down on the table. "And you think an apology is enough to undo 20 years of that?" She lowered her eyes. "No, I know it's not. Nothing can undo it." Silence stretched between us, so long I thought it might end the conversation entirely. But then I looked at her, the woman who had fiercely defended my sister from every bump and bruise, yet had never once spoken up when I quietly broke apart. And I asked, slowly, "Did it ever cross your mind that I wanted to be seen as part of the family too? Not the shadow in the background, not the wallet, not the backup plan, just a daughter, like Tessa." My mother looked up at me, and she didn't respond. Just red-rimmed eyes, arms still wrapped around that box of tart like a shield, lips trembling with words on the verge of forming, but in the end nothing came out. I understood. Some people aren't cruel. They're just cowardly. And sometimes, cowardice is what wounds us the most. She stood, placed the box on the table. "If you don't want to keep it, I understand." I didn't touch it. I didn't reject it. I didn't stop her. She walked out without looking back. I stared at the box. A part of me wanted to throw it in the trash, like how I'd been placed next to it that night at the party. But I simply sat there, and for the first time, I didn't feel responsible for fixing anyone else's pain. I wasn't waiting for an apology anymore. My mother had come, with a tart and words I'd longed to hear my entire life. But what remained unspoken was louder than anything she managed to say. I wasn't angry anymore, but I didn't believe either. A few days later, my phone lit up with a call from Tessa. I watched the screen. 20 seconds. 30. Eventually, I let it ring out. An hour later, she texted, "Sis, I really want to talk. I've been thinking a lot. There's so much I didn't see." I didn't reply. I no longer blamed Tessa. I just no longer carried the duty of healing what others refused to acknowledge. I opened my laptop, began typing an email. Not just to her, but to the entire family group chat, the same thread where, for years, I was always the first to respond, the first to organize, the first to say, "Should we all get together?" The message was only a few lines. Hi everyone. I'm writing this not to stir conflict but to make one thing clear. I will no longer play a role I didn't choose for myself. I'm no longer the emergency fund, no longer the silent hand behind the party without a seat, no longer the one who quietly takes the blame. If family only has space for those who fit the part, then I'll build a different table, one where everyone is heard and respected. No need to reply. This isn't an invitation to debate, Danielle. I hit send. What I felt wasn't relief. It was clarity. My hands didn't shake. I wasn't afraid of backlash. I just knew, for the first time, I had done something purely for me. Not for peacekeeping, not for appearances, and not because the eldest should always be the understanding one. That evening I opened my inbox. There was an email from Logan, Tessa's almost husband. "Danielle, I'm sorry I stayed quiet that night. I should have spoken up. I saw everything, and I didn't know what to do." I read it and replied, "Silence is a choice too, Logan." That was it. I hit send. The reply wasn't meant to change him. It was for me, to finally hear myself speak the truth out loud. Silence had been the cage I lived in for decades. Now, I knew I could step out. A month after sending that final email, I received an envelope in the mail. My mother's handwriting. Familiar, slightly slanted to the left, like the hand that wrote it was still hesitant with every letter. Inside was an invitation to Thanksgiving. No explanations, no apologies. Just one handwritten line. "Only if you feel ready." I set the card on the table, stared at it for a long while, then didn't open it again. That night, I opened the bottle of champagne I had once brought to the engagement party, the one that had sat in my wine rack untouched ever since. I poured myself a glass, stepped onto the balcony of my little apartment, and looked out at the glittering city. There was no toast, no clinking glasses, but I knew I was celebrating something real. I was celebrating myself. It was no longer the silence of endurance. It was the silence of freedom. I opened my laptop and logged into my personal blog, the space where I'd been journaling quietly each month as a form of healing. I changed the name of the site to The Second Seat, a name that came to me during a sleepless night, remembering exactly where I'd sat at that party. But now, it no longer symbolized exclusion. It marked the beginning of a new kind of table, one where I choose who gets a seat, and I am the first to arrive. I wrote, "I no longer sit beside the trash. I no longer wait to be invited to the main table. I've built my own table, not glamorous, not lit by golden candles, but with room for kindness, truth, and respect. And if you've ever sat at the side seat, held your fork without being served, given your all without being seen, I want you to know, you are not alone, and you deserve a seat at the center where your voice rings clear." I hit publish. Not to make noise, but to find closure, for myself. I don't know if I'll go to Thanksgiving dinner with my family this year, but I do know this. If I go, it won't be to be accepted. It will be to decide whether the connection is still one I want to keep. Because forgiveness doesn't always come after an apology. Sometimes, it comes when we untie ourselves from old expectations and pain and simply say, "Enough." And you know what? It really is enough. What about you? Have you ever had to stand up for yourself, even when it meant stepping away from your family? Have you ever been labeled the strong one, as if that meant you didn't need care? Share your story in the comments. And if you've ever had to reclaim your voice in your own family, like, share, and subscribe. Because everyone deserves a seat, not at the edge of the table, but right at the center.